The White Sox have played over a month and some change of baseball. My guest and I go over how things are a little bit different from 2024 on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Sam Phalen is more than just a contestant on season 47 of Survivor. He's a diehard Sox fan, and he's taken over as site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided network. And I thought, why not have my now boss at the site join me to discuss how things are going through the first 30-plus games for the White Sox, the Tim Elko phenomenon, and a Nashville perspective on the dark cloud, small possibility of the Sox leaving. And Sam, thanks for joining me. My family really appreciates you taking over Southside Showdown as it allows me to have a little bit more time. I also appreciate, though, that I still get to write for you guys. Sam, how do you think this season has been different from 2024?
Oh, man. Well, it honestly is shocking to me, Todd, because, Sox fans probably look at the record alone. And sometimes I double take at the White Sox record at this point, because my eyes are telling me that it is a much improved product from what I saw from them in 2024. And then I look up and I realize that they're pacing for a record somewhere right in the same ballpark, or at least they were prior to this little 10-game stretch that they've put together here. But I would say the easiest way to summarize the White Sox is better process all throughout, better at bats. This team appears to be more patient at the plate. They take walks. They've got better command of the strike zone. And then a lot of credit goes to Will Venable and his coaching staff for sort of the energy that surrounds this team, where I don't recall any issues of the White Sox having hustling problems or bad fundamental baseball problems. They're not the most talented team. They make errors. They strike out a lot. The bullpen gives up a lot of home runs. So those are shortcomings that are going to lead to a lot of losses this season. But I think it's a more enjoyable, less like head-scratching, mind-numbing brand of baseball, which is great for what we were expecting in 2025.
Yeah, I have definitely had a lot more when I watch the games where I don't want to gouge my eyes out and be like, this is terrible baseball. Like, this is actually a fun team to watch. And the only reason why they're losing games is either they're overmatched or, again, it's the same. The only thing that's been the same problem from 2024 that's carried into 2025, it's the bullpen. I mean, the bullpen just keeps blowing leads. It either slowly blows out or you just die by sudden death, you know?
Or, I mean, like one of the stats, and I'm not sure where they rank in this margin now, but like the White Sox are 27th in home runs today. And throughout 3 or 4 weeks of the season, they actually had a fly ball rate that was like towards the top 10 of Major League Baseball. So you have hitters who are getting up there, commanding the strike zone, taking pitches, hitting fly balls. That's everything that we've asked the White Sox to do. And yet 27th in home runs. Well, it's because these guys are hitting soft fly balls and they're not the most talented hitters. But I think if you're a White Sox fan and you're watching Joshua Palacios and Jacob Amaya and these guys who are not part of the long-term plans take good at bats, well, it makes you more confident in Edgar Caro and Chase Mydroth and, the other young players that we hope to see in Chicago by the end of the year, that they will also be, raised sort of under this good culture and good process.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've noticed, I like that you brought up Caro and Mydroth. Caro is definitely, I think, going to be a dude. He's got that stud status. Mydroth, I don't know if he'll be, a great player, but he definitely raises the floor. And that's the other thing where you get excited because you at least now have 2 data points, 2 guys to look at and say, hey, we got some hope here.
Yeah. Well, it's nice because, I think I totally agree. Edgar Caro, I think, has all the makings of just a high-end major league catcher. When you talk about MLB catchers, the Cal Raleighs are the anomalies of the world. These guys that are going to hit 35 home runs, and Salvador Perez for a number of years has been that guy as well. But if you can get decent offensive output from your catcher, where he's got an OPS over 750, he's getting on base at a 360 clip, and he's hitting 15 home runs a year. I think Edgar Quero was showing perfectly able to do those, to put up those numbers consistently as a major leaguer. He's a 22-year-old catcher. Love that trajectory. Mydroth, I agree with you as well, Todd. I think, there is a floor with Mydroth that is at least exciting, even if he doesn't tap into the power that would make him an above average major league player. He's a starter on a team. Like, he is a major league starter that is going to play the game the right way and take good at bats and play good defense and run the bases well and give you energy. And maybe he makes no all-star teams in his entire career, but that's okay if he's an everyday starter. And for White Sox fans who have been watching this team that is either washed up veterans or prospects that are on their way out because they're bad or failed, in the case of Eloy Jimenez and Yohan Moncada. Like, when I look at a Lenin Sosa, there are things to like about Lenin Sosa, but I have no confidence that Lenin is going to be on the team 3 years from now. I don't expect him to be a fixture of this next contending White Sox core. The fun part about Mydroth and Quero is that you think the White Sox now have 2 players that they can check off as starters on their next contending team that they have found and brought up to the big leagues.
Yeah, and we didn't have that last year, especially in 2024. I mean, obviously, it was clear they were going to trade Garrett Crochet, maybe in the starting rotation, obviously, with Davis Martin and Jonathan Cannon and that 4-game cameo with Sean Burke. But otherwise, positionally, it was like, well, maybe Corey Lee's going to be the backup catcher for the future, which is not a terrible thing. But otherwise, it was like there's nothing there. And I'm with you with Lenin Sosa. Like, to me, I'm just riding Lenin Sosa until he stops hitting. And then once he stops hitting, move on. But otherwise, if he's even going to hit for average, fine. It's okay. Speaking of moving on, at some point, it looks like the White Sox are going to be trading Luis Robert Jr. When do you think he's going to get traded?
I think it'll come in June. I know, Bob Nightingale is saying the Sox are sort of targeting Memorial Day. I think that's a little bit optimistic, but I do think like Chris Getz has shown us the ability to be patient in the past. He hung on to Dylan Cease all the way through spring training one year. He did not trade Garrett Crochet at the deadline last year and waited into the offseason to get the best value possible. Getz is a patient GM. I don't think he's somebody who will just move Luis Robert Jr. at the first chance that he gets. And I think the White Sox, sometimes to a fault, have shown us that they're willing to bet on their own guys. It's why Andrew Vaughn is still in the lineup hitting every day, because they're banking on Vaughn's production coming back around. And I think the White Sox are going to continue banking on Luis Robert Jr. having a really hot stretch and getting really good value. I don't think they hold him all the way to the deadline. I think, if Robert keeps going on this trajectory we've seen him on for the last 2 weeks or so, that teams are going to start getting very interested. And maybe the best case scenario for the Sox is jumping the market, with a guy like Robert, whose control is starting to come to an end here. If you can get an extra month out of him as the team that's buying him, that could make the difference in what kind of prospect capital the White Sox can get in return.
Yeah, I like how you pointed that out, because, I mean, again, it's just 2 ships now passing in the night, because he's a Scott Boras guy. Scott Boras always takes his guys to free agency. And I would definitely want to take the jump the market guy, because I think it would be organizational negligence to still, like, I'm fine that they're risking right now Luis Robert Jr. staying healthy, because I think they also have a plan to keep him healthy, but you still are always going to have that dark cloud hanging over it. So, find somebody that's going to jump the market, because somebody will. And yeah, get them dealt, for the value that you want, that you're going to see, because we know Chris Getz does aim high too. Speaking of aiming high, I mean,
real quick on Robert. Yeah. I mean, like, the thing with Robert to me, and I know a lot of White Sox fans out there are sort of upset at the idea of trading him, especially once he's been on this hot streak, right? We've seen over the last 2 weeks that Luis Robert, when he's at his best, can win you a game by himself. He can play defense, he can rob a grand slam and then hit a home run later that day and drive in 2 on a double and steal a couple of bases. He can do it all. And it really is what makes him a special player that the White Sox saw when they signed him, and, that made him the highly touted prospect that he was. But what you have to ask yourself, which is the same thing that you might have had to ask yourself about Garrett Crochet, is Luis Robert... So we all good? We all good?
Yeah, we're all good.
But is Luis Robert Jr. going to be on the next White Sox playoff team? You have to ask yourself that question very honestly. And when you look in the mirror, like, I don't think, obviously, the 2025 White Sox are going to the playoffs. I don't think the 2026 White Sox are going to be a playoff team either. And because of that, it sort of leaves you no choice but to see if you can maximize the value and get some MLB ready prospects, especially position players, because that's where the organization is very weak right now.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you. And also in 2027, where they might the soonest be competitive, he's going to be 29, which is not terrible. But do you want to give him even more money than beyond that for year 30, year 31, 32, when he's been consistently, the injury problems?
Yeah.
How long can he stay healthy? So I fully agree with you. Maximize the asset to get more assets. And speaking of an asset that just came out of nowhere, the Rule 5 pick, first, number 1 overall, Shane Smith, is he possibly going to go down as the best Rule 5 pick in franchise history?
No, certainly, right? I think he's already almost in that conversation. Just, you don't see guys hit this instantaneously very often out of the Rule 5. It's a real testament to, right now, probably the shining star of Chris Getz's tenure as general manager, but really to the entire front office and what they've been able to build as far as being sort of a pitching factory with Brian Bannister here and being able to identify talent that Shane Smith has and, know how to sort of nurture it. Really fun start to the year. I think this was something that we needed because there were just so many, I guess, hits to the chinks in the armor on some of these young pitchers, Mason Adams and Juan Corella. And like, these guys are going down with season-ending injuries. Kai Busch goes down. I was so excited coming into 2025 about the young starting pitching that we would see throughout the entire White Sox organization. Certainly some of that is still out there with Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz and these prospects that are throwing in the minor leagues. But to have a guy like Shane Smith come out of nowhere and look like a legitimately very good starting pitcher that could make the American League All-Star team as a rookie, is just a catalyst towards what you might be building for in the future and what you might have in your starting rotation very soon.
All right. The calls for Tim Elko being promoted grow louder by the day. After the break, we're going to discuss the 26-year-old first baseman becoming a fan phenomenon, and that's next on Locked On White Sox. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. Here with the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, Sam Phalen. And Sam, we all know that you bet on Survivor, but you are a diehard White Sox fan. And, I just want to give you a moment. Hey, man, plug your stuff, plug where we can find you on Twitter, basically your background.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. You're right. I grew up in the Chicagoland area and I am a diehard Chicago sports fan. I actually ended up in Nashville, for college, stayed in Nashville afterwards and worked in Nashville in sports media as a beat reporter for the Tennessee Titans for about 4 years over the last 4 years. So I've been with the Titans in the locker room covering the National Football League, but recently decided to make a move and, tried to go back to where my fandom and where my heart is. And, the White Sox, as you mentioned, are always my first love and my biggest love. So really excited, just got going over at SouthsideShowdown.com. Part of the FanSided network to lead all the coverage there. You're writing over there. I'm writing over there. Just putting out all kinds of White Sox content every day. Twitter, X. I'm pretty active over there at Sam_Phalen, Phalen on the last name, but Sam_Phalen on Twitter. And then, SouthsideShowdown.com for all the written stuff covering the White Sox.
Yeah, I'm excited that you've taken over. Again, it was just, for I got to work a 9 to 5. I do this. I'm still running the Blackhawks site. So it was like when it was approached that they're like, hey, Sam's going to be taking over. I was like, awesome, because, people know him. He's you're well respected too in the White Sox fandom community. So really excited of where you're going to take this. Now, did you ever expect the cries for a former 10th round pick to be promoted be this much? Because it seems like everybody is just demanding Tim Elko get promoted.
So I have to be honest here. Yes, regarding Tim Elko, this was actually something that I foresaw, because when the White Sox first drafted Tim Elko, it was the same draft that they drafted Jacob Gonzalez. They also drafted Ole Miss catcher Calvin Harris in this draft. And I had, a colleague of mine who spent a lot of time covering Ole Miss baseball and all things Ole Miss, reached out to me elated that the Chicago White Sox were landing Tim Elko. I had him described as, one of the best baseball players I've ever covered, just one of the best guys all around the clubhouse. Impossible not to root for him. Awesome kind of captain. When I heard Tim Elko described, he really just reminded me of like college Paul Konerko. And just like that seemed to be his whole mantra, is just a rootable, lovable guy who shows up to work every day and gets the job done. And I thought to myself, the White Sox need a little bit of that, like that would be a nice, refreshing thing. Did I expect Tim Elko to hit 10 home runs in April and just like absolutely dominate the minor leagues this, at this point in his career? Certainly not. But it's been very fun to see. And I think White Sox fans ready to sort of turn over a new leaf. They're ready to get this sour taste in their mouth gone. Andrew Vaughn, fair or foul, is part of that sour taste. And so, you watch Andrew Vaughn struggle to start the year again, which seems to be the year-over-year thing that, with June 15th, Andrew Vaughn becomes the best hitter on the planet. But where was he the first 2.5 months of the season? We've seen that. We've seen that movie before. We've read this book before. Tim Elko is new and fresh. And so it doesn't surprise me to have White Sox fans calling for him. And Todd, I mentioned earlier, the White Sox are not hitting home runs as much as this style of baseball can be fun to see, because they're taking their walks and they're, the starting pitching is pretty good, and they're hustling and playing a decent brand that doesn't make you want to pull your hair out. I sit and watch games go, it would be really nice if somebody could just hit a home run every once in a while. Nobody really has any pop in the lineup. And Tim Elko, whatever value you want to put on a first baseman that's already 26 years old in the minor leagues at this point, sure, fair enough. But if he hits bombs, nobody's going to care. It would be a welcome sight and a welcome addition to this team.
Yeah, I'm an Elko truther. In fact, I was pounding the table. Elko should have been the starting first baseman out of spring training. They should have never have actually tendered Andrew Vaughn. Use that $5.8 million to address your bullpen, to get some maybe guys that you could trade at the trade deadline. Give me more William Bergolas. Give me all the William Bergolas you can find. That type of stuff.
Good point.
And that. And the other thing is too, think about it. Okay, he's 26. Yes, he's an older prospect. But you would have a first baseman, if he can hit home runs, that's the key. Can he hit home runs at the big league level? You would have him now at 26 through age 32 on a very, very cheap contract. You would never have to spend any money basically on first base, when you shouldn't be spending any money on first base. And I'm fully with you too on Andrew Vaughn. Like, okay, he's going to hit by June 15th. The numbers say he probably will hit by June. You look at his career numbers, but then all it does is it returns him to replacement level. This was supposed to be a cornerstone guy. So I guess the other thing that I just want to ask you is how disappointing is it then the front office won't even entertain, like, hey, maybe he gives you your main Mercedes like bump for 1 month, or even, hey, let's give me the summer of Matt Davidson. At least that was fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Elko, I will say I'm not in favor of entertaining Elko temporarily. Like, I think all of these players, these Edgar Caros, these Chase Mydroths, I think it's the reason, like, I would love to see Kyle Teal in the major leagues right now. But right now, when you look at the roster breakdown, where are the at-bats for Kyle Teal? I think the White Sox are loving what Matt Theis is bringing, both the starting rotation as a backstop, also to the plate and to his approach and his on-base percentage. And the more you play Matt Thaiss, the more his trade value potentially goes up. So you have Caro, you have Thaiss, Corey Lee potentially coming back from injury at some point. I'm not sure they're ready to quit on that yet. So as much as I want Kyle Teal, I think the White Sox need to bring these guys up when the at-bats are there for these guys to be the everyday guy. And right now, Caro and Mydroth have established themselves that they can be everyday players. I don't want to see Tim Elko get called up and be Brooks Baldwin, who's getting benched for Joshua Palacios, against a left-handed pitcher for God knows what reason. I'd like to see him in the lineup every day. Now, I do think it is important, though, to talk about what you said. And I think this is part of Chris Getz's thinking when he is making decisions about when to bring Elko up. Tim Elko is 26. Realistically is going to be a one contract guy, right? Like you're not looking at Tim Elko like we were looking at Luis Robert Jr. or Yoan Moncada when they first got here as like, Luis Robert Jr. could be a White Sox for 15 years, right? He could play his entire career here. He's 22. He could be a star now, and he could be a star for you in a decade. A decade from now, Tim Elko is not going to be a White Sox. I don't think he'll be on this team at 36, 37 years old. So the White Sox need to try and time up this Tim Elko window and get high-level first base power production during their contending window. And that, I think, is what White Sox fans are wanting. How often... I've been an Andrew Vaughn fan, tried to defend him as much as I possibly can throughout his entire White Sox career. But when you look at these other teams in baseball, almost all of them that are contending have a first baseman that is hitting 30-plus home runs every year. Like there is just a level of power output that comes from those premium power positions that you have to have. And Andrew Vaughn's 20 home runs a year, 17 home runs a year, whatever he's going to give you, is not good enough. It's fine for a left fielder. It's fine for a third baseman if you're good at those positions defensively and can be like the 7th best player in the lineup. But when you are relied upon to be a middle of the order power bat, that's not going to cut it. And so Tim Elko, value aside, right? He's not the high-end prospect Braden Montgomery is. He's not the player that Edgar Caro probably even is, in terms of positional value. But if he plays first base and he hits home runs, and he's only a White Sox for 6 years, well, that gives you at least one consistent, reliable power bat at first base who plays a good defensive first base for what we hope are contending years in the future. And so I think Chris Getz and the front office, I think they're waiting as long as possible to start that clock and to, really turn the keys over to Tim Elko. And they want to make sure that the Andrew Vaughn experiment is over before they do it.
Yeah, which is fine. But I was even listening and recording on Monday for tomorrow's episode. 670 score. Lawrence Holmes pointed out you could basically walk and chew gum at the same time. You could give Andrew Vaughn at bats at DH. Heck, you can even move him back out to left field. I mean, it doesn't matter right now. You are basically in a non-competitive window. You could try out numerous things. So I like that you did point that out because I have failed to point that out. Sorry, listeners, but you can basically walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah. I think really what it is the White Sox are looking to cash in on their trade chips, possibly.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned relief pitchers as being like, you can get a William Bergoya at the deadline and, be looking back a year later being like, wow, nice little swap that we got there. We're excited about that. And, they signed Josh Rojas to a 1-year deal. Josh Rojas isn't, the best baseball player in the world. But, he's versatile. He does some things nice. If you can get a nice little 2.5-month stretch from Josh Rojas, maybe you can flip Josh Rojas for, a piece at the deadline. And maybe that's what the White Sox are waiting for, because you are right. They can do Andrew Vaughn and Tim Elko in the lineup at the same time. But they have a lot of these corner infield types, right? If Miguel Vargas is going to be your everyday third baseman, and we like Chase Mydroth in the lineup every day, where is Josh Rojas going? Is Josh Rojas playing short? Where's Lenin Sosa playing, right? So I think that is the holdup for the Sox right now, is they're trying to give as many at-bats to some of these guys to see, can we get something for you at the deadline? And if we get to a point where Josh Rojas is struggling and he doesn't need everyday at-bats, that's when I think we'll start to see Elko get called up.
Yeah, that's a fair point for anybody that says, "Well, you're not going to get much." I'd still take a William Bergola. I would still take a Jarrell Perez. And like for example, if Matt Thaiss can continue to play a professional back, a catcher, a contender's going to want a guy like
Right.
him as a backup. They have value, even if Josh Rojas, if he might be able to get you again a scratch off prospect, and you get him, and they're like, "Hey, this guy shows some promise." I'm all for that, and I
I
think
went
that.
back. I'm sorry but it's right on brand with what you're saying. I went back and I looked at old White Sox trades last week, just from like the last 3-4 years, even back to the Rick Hahn era. And we remember the Garrett Crochet trade. We remember the Dylan Cease trade package, right? We remember these big ones, the Lucas Giolito deal. I started to look at those forgotten one-off trades that the White Sox made, right? Like you trade Kendall Graveman and you get Corey Lee. The White Sox made a trade where they got Aldrin Batista, who's a top 20 prospect in the system right now, for future cash considerations and bonus slot money from the Los Angeles Dodgers. The White Sox traded Keenan Middleton to the Yankees and got Juan Corella in that trade, who then just started blossoming into this prospect. Had an unfortunate injury that is going to take him out for all of 2025. But Juan Corella was looking like a real piece. Like, there are trades that you can make. Tanner Banks to the Phillies for Bergoya, Paul DeJong to the Royals last year for Harold Rosario, who's a double-A, like high leverage relief pitcher who I don't think, it's impossible that we see in the major leagues before like the end of this year or next year. So those are the types of trades that you do as an organization that can really help you catalyze this rebuild. And so as much as we want to see Elko, like you said, right, we want to see Kyle Teal as well, but at bats for Matt Thaiss, at bats for Josh Rojas, at bats for some of these veteran players, if they're successful, it could flip. You could flip them for a mid-level prospect, and then who knows what that guy can turn into if you do it right.
All right, before we go to the break, though, the one thing I like that you're bringing up Kyle Teal. The only thing that I'm just disappointed with Kyle Teal, because I have no problem. I'm with you. I have no problem if he's down at AAA right now, because also you want to get him more at bats. I believe he was like 300 at bats behind like what Adley Rutschman got. So there's nothing wrong with getting him some more at bats, see more pitches, but start playing him in the outfield. Start playing him at first so he can get more reps, because I want Kyle, because I want Kyle Teal up. When he's up, I want him and Edgar Caro in the batting lineup every day together. And that means DH him more too. Get them used to that psychological that you are going to have to DH. You can't go into the field to forget about it. That's where I think he needs to be. Catching wise, he's gotten enough reps in the minors to be a catcher, and he's going to work with Walker McKinnon anyway when he gets up to advance his catching skills. So that's the only thing that I've just been noticed. I don't know what you've been seeing, because I know you're a big prospect guy too with Kyle Teal, but I want to be like, get him some reps in the outfield.
No, I like that. I mean, the bat certainly plays with Teal. I'm like really encouraged by Teal this year, only because he like hasn't been playing incredibly well offensively, and yet all of his offensive production is like it's solid, right? Like when your worst baseball is still like solid minor league production, that's when I really start to get excited about a bat. I think he has like a pretty clear floor, just with the walk rate, and the clear bat to ball skills that he has. But the attractive thing about Teal when they got him as the headliner in the Garrett Crochet trade was the athleticism, right? Because you raise an eyebrow a little bit when you see a catcher being the big return for Garrett Crochet with Edgar Caro in the pipeline. But that was sort of the messaging from the White Sox was, well, we're okay having both of them. And we're okay having two catchers that we can, are interchangeable behind the plate. And one day Teal will catch and Caro will DH. And the next day Caro will catch and Teal will be somewhere else. But we've also heard from Will Venable that he likes to keep that DH spot flexible. He likes to keep it open where you don't just have one designated hitter every day. It makes the lineups a little bit more creative. And if you're going to do that, Teal needs to be able to work out at first base and left field. He needs to be able to, get some reps under his belt there. And you want him to get that ideally in Charlotte before he's in Chicago learning on the fly, like they did with Andrew Vaughn and Brooks Baldwin and Gavin Sheets at one point even.
Yeah, that's why I was also hoping they would do that with Caro. They did have him at DH a few times, so I think they at least got him some mental reps there. But
he's DHing today.
Yeah, and also looking at what he does behind the plate and how he's improved so immensely, especially with that arm. That's definitely a guy that I would more entertain being your everyday catcher, just because again, what he can cut down. on the base pass. Not saying that Teal can't do that, but again, as you said, with Teal's athleticism and more versatility, just get him some more reps because let's not
I don't
do
think Caro can play the outfield. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is Caro's first base, catcher, DH. Kyle Teal is big enough and athletic enough where I don't think left field is out of the question for him. I wouldn't want to do right field personally, only because, I think having a big arm out there is pretty huge. And I think Braden Montgomery is probably a likely candidate to slot into that spot.
Fully on board with you. And that's the other thing too. Like, and again, if he makes a mistake in the outfield, okay, at least at the minimum, it's a double. But what I don't want is bad lines being taken. We saw that with Baldwin and Wright, even though he did have a little bit of reps. But remember Andrew Vaughn, like that's where he was just horrific. He just took some of the worst lines you would ever seen in the field.
Yeah.
Well, Sam is a Nashville native, so let's get his thoughts on a major league team ever going there, and if it will be an expansion team or if it's going to be the White Sox, and we'll discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, and the smell of the ballpark food. And if you're looking to go last minute, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. With last minute deals, all-in pricing, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as Game Time gets closer, meaning you can score an incredible deal. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On, and as the White Sox season rolls on, I can count on them to help grab tickets that meet my needs. The Game Time Pick features makes finding the best deals effortless, filters out the fluff, and highlights the top discounts in the stadium. And I love that I can preview my exact seat before purchasing. No bad surprises when I get to the stadium. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball friends to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts. This show is available on all major podcast platforms. And I am here with Sam Phalen, site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided network, former contestant on Survivor. Sam, how many times do people say, hey, I remember you on Survivor?
Very often, very often. I do have this going for me. I didn't have a beard when I filmed Survivor, and I grew out the beard on the island. I've kind of kept the facial hair since, so I think that buys me a little bit. Often people will not recognize me right away because they're a little thrown off by the facial hair. So,
hey, it'll happen. My former roommate about 2 decades ago was Greg Matzik. He's up in Milwaukee. He was on Beg, Borrow, and Deal too. You met Greg?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, Greg was my landlord / roommate for 6 years. We worked together at WTMJ, and I still to this day cracked up when we were watching some of the shows and together because I watched it with him, and it was just funny when he was shaving his back. I thought that was the most hilarious thing that I've ever seen. So, but anyways, Sam, what is the current temperature like for MLB coming to Nashville?
The timeline, I would say, I think Nashville will have a Major League Baseball team by the end of the decade. Before 2030, my expectation is that expansion and figuring out the landscape of the future of the league is going to be a priority for Major League Baseball officials when the new collective bargaining agreement rolls around, which will be the end of the 2026 season. That off season, we've heard the scare, the fear about a potential lockout coming, coming again, which I certainly think is also on the table with just how far apart players and, owners and the league seem to be on pretty much every matter at this point. But I do think that will be a big sticking point for Major League Baseball. They've expressed the interest. Rob Manfred has expressed the interest to expand. They have multiple bids in already from cities on both the East and West Coast that are looking to add teams. And so that will be on the docket. And, if a team were to be added, or two teams in this case were to be added, it's obviously not a snap your fingers and play baseball. Although we are seeing now with Oakland and Tampa that you could just go into a minor league stadium and then, you can do whatever you want. But, I think that would start sort of the construction process on a new stadium, and the transition period would probably be a few years. So 2029, 2030, right around like that end and turn of the decade is where I think we will see Major League Baseball go from 30 teams to more than 30 teams. And Nashville certainly will be at the center of a lot of those conversations.
And again, Nashville, it's a growing city, growing community. That's probably why it's going to be the place where you want to put a team in, especially since when you look at the map, yeah, you got Atlanta, but there's not much else between, Atlanta and even Chicago.
Yeah, I mean Nashville is it's a booming city, booming industry in pretty much every industry. Every business industry that you can think of is thriving in Nashville right now. That people are flocking here, and all of the surrounding suburbs of Nashville did not used to be suburbs of Nashville. They used to be just a few houses and like a big plot of land, are now becoming thriving suburbs because they're running out of room and space to put people. But Nashville is very, very quickly on the rise. You already have an NFL franchise. You already have an NHL franchise. MLS soccer came to Nashville and has been a massive, massive, massive success. Nashville SC is one of the more popular teams in town. And I really think Nashville SC sort of set a blueprint for what Major League Baseball in Nashville, what they want it to look like, right? Because the Titans came in the 90s and, the Predators came in the early 2000s. And Nashville was still Nashvillians when those franchises got here. And the difference about Nashville SC and now, actually, Nashville just landed a bid to get a WNBA franchise that is coming to Tennessee. But what is different about Nashville SC is that it is a sort of a homegrown team that the transplants of Nashville have really sort of bought into. Most of the people that you meet down here in the greater Nashville area are from all over the country. They already have like their favorite teams. They already have an NFL team that they root for, or an NBA team that they root for, or sometimes an NHL team that they root for. And so Nashville SC has given them a new brand, a new hip Nashville that defines this new era of Nashville. And people have, families, young people have been going out in massive groups to Nashville SC. I think Major League Baseball is going to try and copy that similar model. When you look at Nashville, you ask people what their favorite team is. They're either a very loosely attached baseball fan to their hometown team because they're a transplant, or they're a Nashville native that roots for the Reds or the Braves. And usually those people have not very passionate interests in the Reds or the Braves. Most of the people that I've come across that live in this area, they love Titans football and they've never watched a Major League Baseball game in their life. And so Nashville presents MLB with a unique opportunity to have one of the biggest and fastest growing cities in America with a crop of young people, under 30 people who like to go out, a party culture that, thrives on nightlife. And you're putting a team for a sport that they are not already betrothed to another team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Major League Baseball has already said we're fine going to, places that have been drawing more from tourism, because Nashville has, you said, has become a destination city by going to Vegas, and that type of stuff. So they have no problem. Hey, let's get some people traveling, that type of stuff. But now there's the dark cloud. There's always going to be the dark cloud until some sort of resolution is come when it comes to Rate Field. And Jerry Reinsdorf, he's trying to get public money from Illinois, $1.7 billion. So there's always been, he took that meeting with the mayor. But doesn't the mayor of Nashville hate publicly financing stadiums?
Yeah, Freddie O'Connell is not particularly in on the idea. I mean, the city did just dish out a big chunk of money to the Tennessee Titans for their new stadium. And that really is a big hiccup in the idea of a team moving to Nashville and having a publicly funded stadium, is that, the city is already footing a bill for new Nissan Stadium. Not all of it. Amy Adams Strunk, the owner of the Titans, is paying for over $2 billion of that stadium. But the city is hoping to get some financial benefits from it. The Titans are sort of moving the stadium away from the initial part of Broadway that it's in right now, a little bit further down, trying to expand this kind of industrialized dead area of the city into a booming entertainment district, similar to what the Atlanta Braves did with the Battery in Atlanta and what you've seen kind of what the Bears have talked about doing, if they were to make Arlington happen. So the mayor is not super crazy about the idea. Jerry Reinsdorf met with Mayor Freddie O'Connell when the winter meetings were in Nashville back in 2023. I actually spoke to Tony La Russa and Jerry Reinsdorf during those winter meetings about this very idea, the idea of Nashville as a landing spot. And there's a couple reasons why I don't think this will ever happen, why I don't think this could ever happen. Number one, I don't think Major League Baseball would allow it. When you talk about Nashville and all of the things that I just said about Nashville as a city, there is not another market more attractive for a Major League Baseball team than Nashville. Why would Major League Baseball allow a big market team, regardless of what you want to say about how Jerry spends or the White Sox fan base, a team in Chicago with that TV market? Why would Major League Baseball take that team out of that market to then occupy their hottest expansion zone when they could have both going concurrently by just creating an expansion team there when they want to do expansion anyways? Number two, Jerry Reinsdorf. Jerry Reinsdorf is a loyal guy. We know that he loves his people, that he supports his people. He does whatever he can to help his people, often to a fault, as White Sox fans complain about. Well, Jerry Reinsdorf is also boys with Dave Stewart. Now, Dave Stewart is one of the most vocal members of a committee that is trying to bring Major League Baseball expansion to Nashville. Dave Stewart has been trying to get involved in a Major League Baseball ownership group for nearly a decade now. And so he is a big contributor and is sort of the face of the group that is pushing for the Nashville Stars Baseball Club to become a thing. Dave Stewart, Jerry Reinsdorf, Tony La Russa, they spent a lot of time together at those winter meetings talking about the best ways to do this. Jerry Reinsdorf is not going to allow his White Sox to take Dave Stewart's basically passion project, the thing that he's been spending, the last decade on. He's not going to take that opportunity away from him by moving the White Sox. And then number three is the Ishbias. The Ishbias are certainly seeming to be lined up to make an ownership play on the White Sox in a post-Jerry Reinsdorf world. They now own a majority of the team. Like no shareholder owns a higher percentage of the White Sox than the Ishbias do right now. That includes Jerry Reinsdorf himself. So while Reinsdorf is the controlling owner, the Ishbias are the real future owners of the team that are probably going to end up getting saddled with a new stadium deal and issue that next era of White Sox baseball. The Ishbias do a lot of their business in Chicago. The Ishbias chose Chicago. The Ishbias, I think, are trying to target the market that is in Chicago right now. I don't see how it's beneficial for them to pivot that path now that they're already in on the organization for a team that would be moving to Tennessee.
Yeah, and Rob Hart from WBBM, he was on the From 108 podcast with Beef Loaf on the Au, and he even said, like, TIF money public money has already been allocated for infrastructure to the 78. It's just a matter of getting a project on the 78. And I think the Ishbias do see that, on that vacant land in Chicago as a big time investment to develop that neighborhood and reap the benefits of that, much like the Milwaukee Bucks owners did when they were developing the Fiserv Forum, that type of stuff. Whereas, yeah, you're right. Baseball is going to say, you want us to give up $2 billion? Because that's what would be an expansion fee. That's one of the reasons why they would be going to Nashville. I fully agree with you. The only reason why I just think it's a little bit of a dark cloud is there's a leverage play. And technically, baseball did allow the Bay Area to let the Oakland A's leave. The only thing is Wright Field is not crumbling like the Oakland Coliseum. I mean, that's the only reason. So that's why I always just say it's a dark cloud. Anybody that's ever asked me is what's going to happen. I always said it's just a possibility, but I do think it's going to end up, they're either going to end up at the 78 or they're going to make Comiskeyville down by Wright Field.
Yeah, I mean, the A's are a very, very unique situation to me too. And obviously, I think like the A's, like they're not Chicago. Like they're not Chicago. Oakland is not Chicago. They didn't have the same turnout as Chicago. Even now, the White Sox outdo the A's in attendance. From when the A's are good and the White Sox are just mediocre, the White Sox outdo the A's in attendance. The TV market is nowhere close to the same. Just the money is in Chicago. And when you have an owner who is lined up, like the hardest thing is finding an owner. Like that is the hardest thing for any expansion team. It's the biggest hiccup about, Nashville expansion. Everybody wants to know, well, where's the billionaire coming from that wants to bring the team to Nashville? The answer to them, to me, is, well, it's any billionaire that wants to own any team or any ownership group that makes a play, and Major League Baseball doesn't give them a choice. Major League Baseball approves Nashville as one of the destinations where they can plant a team. I don't think an owner like the Ishbias that would be in the top 3 or 4 wealthiest Major League Baseball owners, that's a good thing for Major League Baseball. I think the league itself is very excited about that. And so to, like you said, give up the $2 billion expansion fee, give up the hottest new market in Nashville to move a team that's already in Chicago with high level investors looking to own the team, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah, you might have a better chance of moving the Rays, and even then, that's probably going to go to Orlando.
I don't think that's impossible. I think the Rays in Tampa are probably not long, but where do they go is the question there.
Yeah, I think they got a better chance of going to Orlando, like I said, or Montreal. They tried to go to Montreal. I mean, that type of thing. So you're right on that. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with some talk on how things are going in the Kansas City Royals series. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion that I've had with Sam Phalen, site expert at SouthsideShowdown.com. And again, Sam, where can we find you on social media?
Sam_Phalen on Twitter X, at Sam Phalen on Instagram as well, and all my writing on SouthsideShowdown.com.
All right, and you can leave the comments too at the episode page on YouTube, X formerly Twitter at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.